I think we can skip the new faces part because I think these are all old faces.
Are you calling us old?
Yeah, I am.
And right there.
I have a question about the recording. Is there a way I can record, or is that a thing you have to be a VMware employee? Do you know?
That is currently restricted to VMware employees only. And I think that brings some justification to looking for alternatives, which I know Sam has proposed. We'll just want to test them out, right?
Next item on the agenda, status updates. I did recently merge a PR into libcnb to support Kate's service bindings, like the new service binding spec.
I saw it. That's Sam's PR.
Yeah, at build time. I was wondering if we should actually cut a release of libcnb soon with that feature in it.
Is there a predefined cadence for release on libcnb, or is it pretty much?
I don't think Ben ever had one.
For a while, Ben just cut a release whenever he wanted. And then he unofficially handed that responsibility off to me, and I cut a release whenever I wanted. But that's why I want this team to exist, because that does not feel like the best possible process.
What? Cut a release. I mean, I think it makes sense to cut a release for if it's a thing people want to use. I mean, I feel like release versions in libraries are fairly cheap.
Yeah. Especially non-breaking changes.
Right. That, and I think most people probably aren't just going to automatically update.
Yeah.
Cool. Is there, I assume there's documentation for cutting a release?
No, you assume wrong. The way you do it is every time you merge something, the automation creates a draft, and you just go to releases and you publish the draft, and that's it.
Okay. It is really built around one single feature for every release. Does this draft get deleted if you merge another PR?
Yep. And the way the versioning works is that there are labels applied to every PR for like what type of SAMVER change that feature would necessitate. So if you merge like 3 patches in a minor, you get a minor, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
I think the reason there's basically been one release per feature is because most of the time folks aren't working on this full time. They're adding features as they need them, and then we just ship them.
Do we generally have documentation on the things you just told me?
No.
In the project?
No, we don't.
It's like an apprenticeship where it gets handed down from the master crafter to the apprentice.
Yeah, it's an oral history where Ben describes what he did to me, and then I describe what Ben described to me to you. But I agree that we should document it. I
just wasn't sure if there was like a standardized place.
Yeah.
Was more of the question.
I am all for doing this correctly. I feel like we should add some of the standard files to this repo. Would be a good place to start, like release MD, development MD, that kind of stuff.
We have that on pack, don't we?
And on the life cycle.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that was more my question. We do this on other repos. That is not.
Yeah, we do.
Okay. I will make it for that.
I think the other thing we do on all of our other Go projects is have a make file that runs tests and linting and stuff. I feel like that's
Wait,
another.
This doesn't do that.
No. I think we should do that.
Yeah, lots of cleanup stuff. At least we have a label for type documentation.
I will create the issue for the make file right now.
Match. How, it's unrelated, Javier, how do I connect to the Slack bot that pings about sub-team sync meeting things?
I think Natalie set those up,
Okay.
and they're just a remind command, so like /remind. And you could tell it to remind a channel of a certain event. And yeah, like you can look into how to formulate that.
Yeah. Cool. There are tests and linting.
Right now, you just run like go test // and if you want to fump the repo, which GitHub Actions does not do for you, you have to run that yourself before committing. It's very ad hoc. And there is no linting built in right now. I think we want all of those things.
Okay, so there's no CI that's run at all.
There
True.
is CI.
I see update pipeline, but I mean, I guess like I'm just looking at the GitHub Actions, and this seems all release based as far as I can tell.
If you go
Oh,
to the
there's
tests action, it does run tests. I think, you know, all of that logic exists only in this workflow, but I like as a practice to have the workflow run the same thing that's easy to run locally. So I think the workflow should call out to a make file to make everything easy.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. Are there other things on top of your head for things that we should do for libcmd?
It's like, I I mean, those are the most basic ones. I'm sure there's more, but I don't have them in my head right now. I think at the working group, we should start giving release updates for libcmp.
Makes sense. There's an issue that you opened on April 7th, the support multiple. I think it's the only one that you created before the ones that were just created now, because the rest are from Sam.
Are you looking at something in particular here?
This one.
Oh, support multiple Buildpack APIs.
Yeah.
We have support for 2 Buildpack APIs, 05 and 06 right now. I don't think we want to backport old ones, but I think we need a strategy for supporting multiples at the same time in the future. We really like to use like the Go module feature. Unfortunately, it gets weird because I would love if those versions sort of match the spec versions. I think it'd be easy for people to understand, but you can't. It sort of like only works for majors. So we could have module versions for each of these breaking OXs, but then we will start having like libcmp version 1, 2, 3. And then when Buildpack API 1 comes out, like that'll be libcmp version 4, right? If they like have a table and have people look it up, it won't ever match if we start doing that now.
Is that the common paradigm in the Go ecosystem?
Yeah, for libraries in particular, it's like you can.
What do they do in our case where there is not a 1.0?
They generally do not support multiple versions simultaneously. It's like any change could be breaking at any time.
Gotcha. There is, I've seen in JSON schema plan while I've been working with that. There in JavaScript, there's an AJV library, and it supports multiple versions. Like it has a default that it brings in when you require it or import it. But then they basically have different imports that you can pull in instead that are matched to the version. So that's potentially another route we could do before we 1.0.
Yeah. The way the Go module stuff works, it's like you would actually have to update all your import statements to switch from one to the other, but it's just sort of like built into the magic that it handles these things for you and is laid out in a way that people understand. Like we could manufacture that with package names and kind of make it look like that.
When's, I feel like Buildpack 07, when is that landing? We have not set a release date for that, right?
Oh, well, someone needs to implement the spec issues if we're going to release that. But the life cycle is releasing a release candidate soon that's using Buildpack API 07. And they would like to ship an actual release after that. And they were not going to ship that release until the spec ships. So there will be some forcing function that should get someone to contribute those issues at some point in the near future.
Do we need to set up processes for RFCs and things to open issues on libcmb? Is that a thing that automatically happens?
I think libcmb has sort of existed outside of the normal conventions before. I mean, up until this point. I think it would make sense to have sub-team RFCs for libcmb changes.
Well, I just mean like potentially if there's Buildpack API changes, there might be changes that would need to happen in libcmb.
Yeah, I think,
And that wouldn't be like a sub-team RFC. That would just be opening a issue, right? Similar to when we need them for pack or lifecycle.
yes,
No.
yeah. Right now when we, oh, you mean sort of like the issues created label or
Yeah.
that new process that does it automatically without this label thing? Yes, we need that. I feel like as we merge Buildpack API changes, we should be creating issues on libcmb and holding ourselves accountable to implementing them. We probably want to start implementing Buildpack API 07 in libcmb as well.
Yeah. Is it a good starting place just to create the issues then? That should be on here.
Yeah.
Based on the 07. libcmb implements all of 06. Is that true?
That is true.
So we don't have to go super far back into the history.
We do not need to go super far back into the history.
So 3 issues are asset packages. Asset package suspect. Are those the same thing? Oh, one's just PR.
Yeah.
Does libcmb need to do anything for asset packages? There's the CMB bar, right?
Yeah, and then MVAR gets passed through to the Buildpack, but I do think libcmb should expose helpers around that. It's like when you run a build, you get an object called a build context, and it basically contains in it in a Go struct all the things that a Buildpack is receiving through the API, sort of in one place. So I think we should include in that like the path to asset packages, and then I think we should include helpers for getting assets out of there, so that Buildpacks do not have to think about the directory structure or anything like that. You should just be able to ask for an asset.
Cool. Pack 7. What was this other issue? Describe the role of the launcher in the setting, Buildpack provide environment variables.
You want to share your screen?
Sure.
Oh, this is just like a documentation change in the spec. I don't think this affects libcmb.
Okay. I know we don't really talk about it very much in release planning. Okay, so the only one is asset packaging. Is that true? Then for 07, that sounds roughly accurate to how we've talked about it in leadership.
Yep.
Cool. All right, I'll make an issue for that and link to the RFC for libcmb. Do we care about trying to solve the multiple Buildpack API thing before cutting libcmd stuff for 07?
I'm gonna say.
Or should we just do what we're doing for 05 and 06 for now?
Let's figure out what we are doing for 05 and 06. I think it's an interesting question because it's like an additive change. So it would be pretty easy to add all of this without doing anything complicated with the library architecture, but it could be confusing to users to have this functionality exposed when they pull in the latest version if they're not using the newer API, right? It's like they ask for assets using this library, and then they get told there is no asset. But I think that's probably fine. Like you have to have defined assets in your Buildpack TOML for this stuff to work for you anyways. So
Sounds like you're leaning towards no for solving it for 07. Also seems
yeah.
like 07 is somewhat imminent, right?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards no for solving it for 07.
Okay.
Like we can just make it tell you that the assets don't exist if the assets don't exist.
Hello, Frankie. Welcome.
Hey, sorry I'm late. I need to put this in my calendar. Someone scheduled a competing meeting.
It's all good. We've just been talking about libcmd mostly, just kind of getting up to speed for me because I've not used it, but also just figuring out, just getting it up to kind of polish that I think both Pack and Lifecycle have, that libcmd has not kind of been under the same level of rigor.
I feel like in the short term, we should clean things up, documentation, make file, implement the new API, cut a release. And then directly after that, I want to talk about the layer contributor interface and what it would mean to make a big change there.
That's the issue Sam opened, right?
Yeah, and I agree with it very much that the current interface is awkward. And I would really like libcmd to almost just, directly mirror the Buildpack API and not do a lot of other things. And I think this decision that it's making, it's not like it's not implementing the Buildpack API, but it's doing it in a very opinionated way. And I don't think libcmd should be opinionated like that. At least not in a way that forces you. Right? I feel like any non-spec implementing opinions should be things that you can optionally use, not things that, get in your way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Paketo is using libcmd, right?
Oh, Paketo's bifurcated. All the Java Buildpacks, all the things that Ben originated use libcmd, and everything else uses Packet.
I mean, I guess that makes sense that Ben's things would use Ben's library.
Yeah. think the vision is to make this a first-class citizen and not Ben's library, which,
Did it become your library when he handed it off to you?
yeah, it became my library, but I don't want it to be my library. I want it to be a generically useful utility.
Technically, it was implementations library, right?
Yeah, it belonged to the implementation team.
Did
So
you
for a while,
also-
it was like Ben's personal library for Java Buildpacks. And
what
then it
happened to
was,
lib Buildpack. Wasn't that also Ben's library?
that was also Ben's library, and he replaced it with this. And then it became Emily's library. And then Emily handed off all the Java Buildpacks to Dan Makuza, but it could never truly become Dan Makuza's library because he was not a maintainer on the implementation team. But rather than continuing to have this be a personal library for Paketo Java Buildpacks that happens to live in the Buildpacks project, I think we should be doing something different here.
One thing I will say, like with a little bit of historical context on this, is like one of the main reasons that some of the Paketo build packs that aren't the Java build packs ended up writing Packet, which like sort of accomplishes a lot of the same things, but with a different approach, was because the team realized that there was a benefit to writing the library that we were going to be using for implementing our own build packs, because then we could do it in the way that made sense for us, I guess. Like we didn't sort of have to like advocate for features that were going to be helpful for us, or organization structure that would be helpful. We could just sort of like do the one that made sense and then use it because we thought it made sense. So while I do think that there's utility in making the one that lives in the upstream project be more generally useful, I do think there's probably also like a trade-off of, well, sometimes it's just better to like write the library that's going to help you the most, if that makes sense. Which I guess was like a side, it ended up being a feature of libcmd for the Java build packs, because it was the same thing. You know, you like write the tooling and then turn around and use it.
I do, you know, I see the utility in sort of having control over something that's very important to things that you're building on top of it. In a world where like more people are writing build packs in Go, I don't feel like it would be ideal for the community at large that's trying to understand what's happening for each, you know, ecosystem of build packs to have a slightly different version of the same thing. Like obviously we would never as a project try to prevent people from writing their own bindings, but I'd love to make this good enough and get enough folks who are stakeholders and who care, like involved in the process, so that it feels compelling to use the same thing. So it's like if the Paketo team feels like it needs, has opinions about what interface is needed to implement a lot of build packs, all of their build packs in Go. And given that, you know, Paketo has a huge number of build packs written in Go, I'd love to like just take that energy and direct it at building a thing that we could then share out and like help bring you guys into the process so that you can have the level of influence that makes you feel comfortable using it.
There's maybe also just like an abstraction kind of thing too. I think like, I think with some of the maybe layer contribution changes to like, if libcmd at least implements it things less opinionated for a certain level, or like that potentially you could have packages implement stuff on top of libcmd.
Yeah, that's sort of,
you get that level of control you want as, you know, the Paketo team to not have to kind of maybe like, there's probably things that you're doing that would never make into libcmd, and that's fine too, but not having to keep up to date with, I think the big advantage is like like when Sam did his kind of analysis of the state of kind of options and libraries that he was looking into for Bloomberg, was like he liked Packet, but like it didn't always implement everything in the Buildpack API. And I think a nice kind of place to get to is like Packet's not responsible for doing that, right? Like that's why you pull in libcmb, and like you kind of get that for free, or you update, you update Packet when you need to support like a newer version, and maybe you have to make some changes because the API changed, but it also does support multiple API versions. And I think that's kind of where I would like to see it go. But
Yeah, I definitely agree that that would be like a huge benefit for Paketo, because like right now we have people who are starting to adopt Packet, which is good because it means that people are sort of engaging with our project. But then we're getting questions about like, when is this feature going to be supported? Or it's hard for me to tell which Buildpack API is supported, because as we were working with it, it was sort of like to facilitate the creation of our own build packs, and we're releasing it like less as like a first class. Like we do cut releases, but it just, I don't know, our attitude towards it is a little bit different. So I think, yeah, it would be great if we didn't have to worry about sort of getting on the latest API as rigorously.
Yeah.
And I also think that, I think something you said earlier, Emily, about having libcmb kind of more literally like sort of build out the Buildpack spec, I think that also has a huge benefit in terms of like, I don't know, like as I was learning about the CMB spec, reading the reference implementation of the life cycle was hugely more useful than reading the prose, because at a certain point, it just sort of is a prose description of code, right? So similarly, like the more that libcmb is a code description of how a Buildpack acts, I think the more that people will be able to understand the spec.
I agree with that. I also have a vision of really good doc comments that all contain sort of deep links to the spec as well. So you can always follow from code to spec. The idea of building like a, ecosystem specific abstraction on top of this, I think I agree with you, Terrence, is a good vision. To an extent, that's what like Ben tried to do with Buildpack. But I think, the reason Packet still existed other than that is because we didn't get the, the primitives in libcmb right. I added a link here because at one point Google was using libbuildpack, I believe, and I just wanted to check what they're doing now, but they have now built a Go binding for Buildpack as well that looks very similar.
are they not? They're still using libcmb though, right?
So they've written an abstraction on top of libcmb that's sort of similar to what we were talking about with like an ecosystem specific abstraction. So like maybe this is,
I feel like this is the way, right? Like,
yeah, this is the way.
you
But I
don't want
wonder,
to, if you're Google, you probably have a way you're doing things, similar to Paketo, right? Like this is how you want all your build packs to look and function, and there's assumptions that are made. So I feel like this is probably a pretty common pattern.
yeah, we should probably reach out to them though, because they're using this layer contributor thing. If we want to make a big change here, might be worth trying to get one of these Buildpack authors involved in this as well.
Do you know who on the Google side actually works on Buildpack stuff today? Is the Buildpack out there?
I mean, just sneaking around this repo, it looks like Jason Collins has been the one writing this abstraction mostly, and Lucas Berger.
Oh, right. I thought Jason went to Red Hat, but it's other Jason. From Google.
Doing a more objective one where I actually look at the contributors, it seems like Lucas is by far the most prolific contributor to the Google Buildpacks. So it seems like he might be someone we would like to get involved.
Sounds reasonable to me.
I'm curious about sort of, maybe we need to do this through the RFC process in the future. I'm excited about other types of tooling we could offer here to expand things. Like I know Frankie's team has some really cool testing libraries that I don't know if they'd be interested in donating. Not gonna try to convince you to give this up without getting a better sense that working in this way meets the team's needs. But I think something like that would be a great thing to be able to generically provide to Buildpack authors through the project.
I know that's something Sam and I mean, not getting the thing from Keto, but he's obviously has looked at stuff from Keto pretty heavily. And it was, I think, in the original RC of ideas for tooling and things of stuff we want to provide to Buildpack authors. I mean, it mostly just sucks. It's just like, well, everyone should be writing tests, but
it'd be a little bit hard, right? Especially implementation tests.
There's also, I think, there's a CLI that is, I guess, like technically part of Packet right now that Paketo uses to do a variety of things that are kind of like managing Buildpack and builder tomls, like updating dependencies and like packaging artifacts and things that, especially the dependency updating stuff, kind of feels like it's starting to move towards things that Pack does. Like, routinely in our pipelines, we're using Pack to create builders from builder tomls and the JAM CLI to update said builder toml. So I think, yeah, there's tooling around sort of like create a custom build pack or builder that maybe could be pushed into upstream as well, or at least I think should be available there.
I really agree with that. I've had thoughts in the past that, like if I want to update a Go mod in my Go project, I can Go mod, go get -u or something. Like it'd be great if I'm writing a, multi build pack to be able to update components that way, either one of them or all of them. I don't know whether, I think there's a philosophical question, but whether we want Pack to be the one CLI to rule them all here, or if we want to be breaking out like a different CLI for Buildpack authorship. I know Javier had some thoughts on that. I'm kind of two minds.
I would love to see instead like plugin or something support inside of Pack where it doesn't have like, I would love, especially because of the sub team stuff, I would love to have a thing that this team owns for that isn't like, oh, we got to go work with, not because we don't like to work with the platform team or anything, but it just would be nice where it's like, it's probably like a thing that isn't in their area of responsibility. And like anytime we would have to update or make a change, kind of have to go work with that team to then cut a release and kind of do that. And third cadence seems to be much more around like release of specs and other things. And you can imagine this tooling having features and things that are very independent of spec changes, right? It's like we like did a thing because it's just better to do it this way, right? And not that Pack doesn't have those kind of releases either, but it just similar to like libcmb, it feels like out of the wheelhouse of like what the charter of kind of the platform team's responsibility for Pack is. And I know Javier has expressed some concerns with that. And I think you can imagine even like Joe's like Buildpack creator, a knit or new, I forget what we renamed it to, but like you could extract that out where like here's just a plugin as a Buildpack author and you get all these tools for free, or not free, but like along with it. I
very much agree with that philosophy. I wonder, like, in order to accomplish all the goals you laid out, like, do we need to go as far as a plugin model? Like, is that too heavyweight? Could we instead just make a library that Pat can just, update?
Sure, we can create a library. I think the separation is probably more important to me. I think plugins enable other stuff, but it also allows, I think, people to then update or kind of do it independent of waiting on it. I feel like with a library, you're still now dependent on Pack to cut and release stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I see, like, my perspective, right, is that Pack from a platform perspective is that it should just be the aspect of building, right? And that is what we define as a platform and sort of the interface. And Pack has kind of taken on this responsibility of providing just general tooling for the entire ecosystem. And those two seem like very different concerns, right? In that, kind of same vein, though, I see the value of having like one tool that the user has to know to be able to do all the operations within the ecosystem. And then the last tidbit, right, is we've had discussions where different platforms might want to leverage just certain aspects of Pack. And I think that kind of goes back to like having independent executables that kind of now ties back to Terrence's, proposal of like a plugin system. So if you could envision that all these additional toolings that could be integrated with Pack in some form or fashion as plugins could also at the same time be standalone CLIs, I think that would kind of get us to where everybody's satisfied. And obviously there's a little bit of overhead in trying to formalize what that interface looks like, but we do have like some really good examples from the Docker ecosystem as to how that works.
I wonder if we could make essentially like a Buildpack, a bat CLI. I'm not even going to try to name it because that will just end in an endless conversation. That's not important right now. But you could either compile the bat CLI and use it, or, you could add it as a sub command in Pack.
Yeah.
I guess I don't want to force users to have to, in addition to upgrading Pack, think about upgrading plugins, especially if they're really like standard features, which is why on some level I sort of
default plugins, right? That just like Pack just bundles stuff in, and so you still get that separation. I similar life cycle, right? Like Pack doesn't, users don't have to deal with manually upgrading life cycle if they don't want to. And I think it could be similar here, where you could just have default versions, and then when we cut new stuff and it feels up to mustard to the platform team and it feels stable for them, they can update that stuff. And then basically, if we do cut new stuff and we want to test it or want people to test it, or people care about the features before Pack cuts a release, they can always upgrade that stuff independent, right?
I guess I'm imagining like you could just, if you wanted to test it before Pack cut a release, you could just use the CLI the subteam is providing instead of upgrading the plugin. Because I'm thinking about like, okay, Pack includes one version. We cut a new version, someone wants to try it. So they upgrade the plugin in Pack. Now maybe we cut even a new version, but the feature the person wanted was met. So they're not continuing to upgrade. And then the next version of Pack pulls in the next version. It's like, do you ever get back on Pack's version, or once you take control, are you always on your own version? I feel like there's just some like things there to think about. Whereas like if there just was a version in Pack that they were consuming from us, and then the way you use versions that Pack hasn't pulled in yet is just directly use them rather than us implementing like a plugin upgrade system.
I guess looking at what Docker has done for their CLI plugin system, they're essentially just additional executables in a directory, right? So you could see the idea of upgrading to like a custom version of this new Buildpack plugin would be to like literally take this release and like dump it in this directory. And when they upgrade pack, it essentially upgrades everything inside of that directory with the defaults. So it would override it, right? At some point when the upgrade happens. That's again like thinking very basic right now, but that's the way I envision it.
And then my other question is like, is an executable enough of a handoff point for pack to have us avoid a lot of duplication? So if we say like, you know, straw dog here, let's say our executable did the whole build pack subcommand that exists in pack right now, and pack's handling builds. I think there's actually some overlap in things that happen there. Like sometimes builds pull in build packs and do build pack things because you're supplying them dynamically. Like then does pack need to also include this as a library if it doesn't want to double implement build pack packaging? That kind of thing. And then if you're pulling it in as a library anyways, then like I have some concern that like an executable doesn't get you the level of flexibility that pack might need to do some of the things it wants to retain responsibility for.
It's definitely worth thinking about more thoroughly, but I could envision where the CLI, right? Like let's say this packaging would be, pack could use the executable as a sub process, right? To do the packaging and it doesn't necessarily have to do it in a quote unquote native library form. But then we have to make sure that we have the capabilities necessary from the CLI to interact with it as we need to. So yeah, definitely something worth thinking about. But I would rather go that route versus, you know, going the library route by default.
Or jamming all in pack.
Yeah.
I guess we don't have to solve this one today. I lean towards the library, but I feel like this is, you know, deciding between two good things that are better than what we have now. So
Yeah, I mean, we can also, just because we pick a thing doesn't mean it can't change in the future, right? Like I imagine we could start with a library because one, there needs to be an RFC for the pack plugin system kind of thing that has to kind of scope that stuff out. Even if that's the system we want to go for, and that's the one Javier wants for platform, but I think we could start with a library of that because that is significantly easier.
yeah. And it doesn't change things for users. So there's really no harm in going to a library as an intermediate step. But there would be harm in going to a plugin system and then deciding that we had to rip it up.
Yep.
Cool. Who's writing the RFC,
RFC?
for that? Yeah.
I don't know. Terrence has a lot of really good ideas. So I don't know.
I'm just the new face. I've never worked with libcmd before, besides laughing at Ben for being on the implementation team. How does this sound to you, Frankie, as a person who has to build actual build packs?
I mean, I guess pragmatically, given that we already have a tool that like does the things that we need, kind of like selfishly from a build pack author's perspective, my take is I'll keep an eye on what's going on in upstream and we'll continue to use our CLI and like add features to it and not really worry about it until it's much closer to the rubber meeting the road, if that makes sense. Because like at the end of the day, we just sort of need tooling that has the features that we need to do things with Buildpacks promptly.
So
and it
we
seems like-
implement so much cool tooling that you get jealous and then you want our CLI
Yeah,
instead.
I mean, basically, yeah. Like, as you know, like if there's a value prop to like moving to libcnb because it will like help us be on the latest version of the Buildpacks API without sacrificing what we think is like nice code design, then like we'll move there. And if the pack CLI or some other CLI takes more like maintainership off of our plates, then yeah, again, we'll move towards that when the time comes.
Do you have any interest in either at one of these sub-team syncs when we have a little bit more attendance, or at an office hours, sort of like showing off to the broader community some of the CLIs and Buildpack author tooling Paketo uses? It might be like good just to, socialize some of those ideas and like get people's juices flowing as to what's possible.
Yeah, certainly. I don't see why not.
As a follow-on related but unrelated question, you were mentioning like waiting for the rubber to meet the road of like the stuff to develop. Is there interest for like, I think there's like two use cases, right? Like there's the libcnb specifically. Is there interest in the broader Paketo team to want to help to move libcnb in a place where Packet could use it?
I won't
Or-
speak for the whole team because that's like not a conversation that has already happened. I can certainly like bring it up and report back, just kind of like gauging what's currently like on the plate of the team right now. I don't think that we have a ton of bandwidth to like re-architect our tooling right now. There's sort of like other things like more around the stacks and dependencies neighborhood that are kind of needing our attention. But I think, like in theory, the problem with the team right now is that we have a lot of scope. And so if there are things that will help us reduce our scope, I think that would be seen positively.
Yeah, I mean, from like in my eyes, that's like a longer term play. So it isn't like, yeah, like please invest like hundreds of hours tomorrow, whatever, right, in the next month. There's definitely other changes, but I feel like in order for it to that plan to actually be successful will require help and input from the Paketo team and potentially, well, I guess the Google team's already doing it, but I imagine they also have input, having done it, of just like, yeah, we did it, but we don't like this stuff. And obviously Sam too, because they're using it at Bloomberg. But I imagine it is only successful when, like, because we can go off and do a thing without input and help from the Paketo team, but we may implement a thing that just doesn't work for Packet, right? To even have that plan.
We should make sure Google doesn't want to make a spirited defense of layer contributors either. Like somehow I doubt that they will, but we should definitely have that conversation. Frankie, I think you mentioned like two things. So one is the team having time to contribute, which totally makes sense. I'm aware of how busy the team is, and I get it. Number two is that you're saying that it's been really good for the team to have control over these tools so they can make the changes they want when they want them. And I'm just sort of curious about what the team would need from like a process perspective to feel like, if imagine a world where the tooling did live in Buildpacks, like what would be necessary from a process perspective to make the team feel safe doing that, like their needs would be addressed and they, had the input they needed.
Yeah, let's see. Well, so I'll also ask that and like get more, like broader opinions, but I think my understanding of this is sort of like Paketo is trying to be pretty opinionated about the way that we write Buildpacks. And so with libcnb currently being as opinionated as it is, it was sort of like, okay, well, these opinions and like Paketo's opinions like weren't necessarily enmeshing very well. And so we had Packet to say like, okay, we're going to have a library that is opinionated, and it's these opinions that we're down with. So if libcnb were going to be like adopted, I think it would really need to be sort of less opinionated, much more about just like exposing the spec primitives. And then I would guess that probably Paketo would add some more abstractions on top. And I would say that, like, for me, that would sort of be the preference, like a libcnb that is, you know, very like tight to the spec, but minimally opinionated, such that we can like take advantage of all of that and then come up with abstractions and like shift around those abstractions as we get new and better ideas about how to write build packs.
If we helped someone on the team who's currently using Packet sort of like work towards maintainership on this sub team, I guess I'm thinking about like process things, like what would help
Right.
people feel comfortable that, you know,
Yeah.
that like one day we're not going to make a bunch of bad decisions, you'll be stuck with
Right.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this sub team is already a great start, and I plan on coming to this pretty regularly, just sort of like of my own, you know, choice. I think, yeah, like if there was a Paketo maintainer who was also a maintainer of libcnb, that could be a positive direction. Alternately, if at minimum just some, if there's a lot of emphasis on people being able to contribute to libcnb, just making it like logistically easier, and then also like interpersonally and process wise, it's like, well, we think this for these reasons as Buildpack authors, and if that's accepted feedback, I think that'll also go a long way, sort of like building trust.
I feel like that is the goal of this team. So
Yeah.
it might take some time, but I hope that I feel optimistic.
Yep. I second that. I mean, I have no love or whatever for how libcnb exists today. So
Yeah, Terrence is like, I would never write my build pack in Go anyways.
I mean, I don't do that. So, but I would love to see it in a better state. I think we can still have opinionated abstractions, whether that lives in libcnb or a separate library. Like, but as long as there are the existing primitives, like I'm of the mind as well. Like, it's great. I think libcnb has to provide the lower level abstractions for stuff like Packet and other things, ideally in the future, to not have to do that. But if everyone's also coming to, the project to build Buildpacks, and we're like, okay, here are all the low level things, like, please go write a Buildpack, that also feels like you feel like you have to then write abstractions on top, and that feels kind of crappy too. So whether that is libcnb or another library, I feel like there should be something that provides at least some abstractions that isn't like basically you're just dealing with the API, because I don't think that's a great experience either.
I think in NI it'd be possible to do this as a series of packages that are not, you know, a mandatory part of the build and detect interfaces, right? So you can use it if it feels like a good interface for you, but, you know, you don't have to otherwise.
I suspect that probably like as the ecosystem of Buildpacks grows, there might be different sort of ways of slicing and dicing higher level abstractions that maybe are like much more intuitive given like this set of aims for a build pack, or like this other one. And if someone just wants to show up and like, you know, write a build pack for their, I don't know, like static site building thing, then like maybe there's a library that just provides lots of abstraction that's just helpful in that direction, would be, you know, utterly useless for something in the Java space, right? So perhaps we can get more abstractions that are more like finely tuned to people's needs. That, I mean, ideally would be contributed by people who actually found them useful.
Yeah, we've had some success there with the Paketo lib JVM, right? Like we got someone built 2 build packs using it, and the build packs are like 1 build pack toml and 3 lines ago,
right?
Which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
But
right, exactly, the sort of higher level, exactly, yeah.
All right, we're over time. Thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
This was good. Have a good one.